couple of quick fun facts about hydropower in the Adirondacks. It's really one of the things that helped create the Industrial Revolution in the Adirondack Park, and was not necessarily aimed at electricity initially. It was generally used to power mills and things like machinery, whether it was grinding something or sawing something. But the earliest of the hydropower in the park was always used to turn some sort of a wheel and to use that power to substitute for human power or for animal power. And eventually became a way of generating electricity that then could be used for a variety of different things. But most of the park's hydro dams started going in around 1920 through 1940. And they are all over the place now, as you might have noticed. The Racket River itself, which is not the longest river in the park, actually the Hudson, the Racket is about the fourth largest river in terms of total length inside of New York State. The Hudson, the Genesee, and the Mohawk are all longer inside of New York. But just to give you a sense of scale, Racket River has 27 hydroelectric plants on it that are owned by Brookfield Power. And that produces annually about 181 megawatts of electricity. That is a continuous power supply, essentially, that is enough power to generate electricity to suit 181,000 individual homes. As you know, the park's year-round population is only about 130,000 people. So the Racket River by itself is producing electricity sufficient to power all of the year-round homes and businesses inside the park. And hydroelectric power in New York, we are one of the larger generators in terms of states. In fact, we produce more hydropower than any other state east of the Rocky Mountains. Some of the big hydro dams on major rivers out west are a little bigger, but in terms of total electricity generated, we're up there. Hydropower in New York accounts for about 60% of the state's domestic energy production. About 24% of that is a combination of ethanol, waste, wood, and landfill gas, accounting for the, essentially a portion of the remainder. And as of 2016, this has gone up since then. Wind, solar, and geothermal were about 12 or 13%. I believe that's closer to 14 or 15% now and climbing at a faster rate than just about anything else. In terms of in-state consumption, New York produced about 10% of its total energy requirement using hydro. New York produces about 10%, almost 11% of the energy that it uses, and of that, 6.4 of that 10% comes from hydropower. So hydro is really only about 6.5% of all the energy New York State uses, but it's most of our renewable energy and is most of what's produced inside the state. Overall in New York, there are 190 operating hydro projects with 240 individual dams. And that figure comes from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So New York produces a lot of electricity that way. And most of these are based on rivers. There is another way to produce electricity through hydropower, and that is through pumped storage. And we have in Mineville a proposal that I have just learned has been canceled. The Mineville Energy Project had been proposed for the Mineville-Witherby neighborhood in one of the old iron mines that had been abandoned and has largely been filled up with bats and water at this point. As the mine shafts are below ground, they tend to have water seep into them, and when they were in use, were constantly being pumped out. But New York has twice very, very quietly denied the water quality permit that is necessary for this mine to operate, and the application has now been withdrawn from the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. So while we are watching this carefully, we don't have to watch it quite so carefully anymore. Just keep an eye out to see whether this gets reapplied for. But the permit that was proposed by Albany Engineering is now defunct and no longer active, and the feds have dismissed it entirely. So moving along, we've got some other stuff happening, however, though. Nearly every hydropower license on the Black River in the Black River Basin will have a new license by 2026, or will have its license expire by 2026. And while it can operate on an expired license, FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, likes to keep the licenses as operational as possible, because that's the only hammer that they have for enforcing rules and regulations for how the waterways are managed. And in the past, back when some of the licenses on the Racket River were being redone, for example, we had the disadvantage of not being able to request things like sufficient fish passage, or consideration of anything other than allowing enough water to pass downstream to dilute the pollution that was being put into the river by a state pollution discharge permit holder further down. Now, thanks to some cases that were won by American Rivers and other folks, which we were party to, we now have the ability to ask for things in the federal license, such as protecting fisheries, rebuilding lost features in the river that have been affected either by flooding or by mismanagement of the river itself. We have the right to ask for scheduling changes for water releases regarding recreational opportunities, including whitewater and other and for sport fishing. And there are a variety of things that we ought to be thinking about with regard to that. I think there are some folks that have reached out to us about this, and that we'll be chatting with about these concerns in the near future. Now, the map I wanted to talk about will give you a sense of scale here of where some of the hydro licenses are being considered just through 2020. So this doesn't include some of the ones in 2026. The map is a little confusing in some places in that there are large water features that don't appear on here, like lakes, and make it a little difficult. So I think that many of these dams right here are part of the Sacandaga Valley project, but it's hard to interpret from this spot. They may actually be up a little higher. But here is the Black River corridor in this neighborhood here, going out toward Watertown, where it exits into Lake Ontario. Above that is the Beaver River, which is fed by Stillwater Reservoir. That appears to have a number of hydro dams on it that will be relicensed as well. And a number of those reservoirs have fisheries in them that have taken kind of a beating over the years as a result of acid rain and may need some assistance. It appears there are a couple of licenses on the Ausable that we'll have to take a look at, and the Saranac. And there may be something on one on the Upper Hudson that we hadn't considered as well. But the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission website has all of this stuff on it now. So hydropower is one of the cleaner sources of energy in New York, mainly because it does not put any pollution out and does not consume fuel. However, the Adirondack Park has paid a pretty large price in terms of the impact on its rivers, and we have been paying that price for quite some time. One of the things that we're going to have to kick around is how many of these hydro facilities are still necessary, how many of them are causing significant ecological problems with the river, including things like siltation from the release of water from the dam, changes in thermal conditions on the river, whether withholding colder water upstream and not allowing it downstream is having an impact on the survival rate of trout in the warmer water, and whether trout are the only species that we should be paying attention to in these cases. I know that they're popular sport fish, but they may not be the only thing that is an indication of ecological health that we should be paying attention to. And certainly, John's rewilding efforts will play into our decision making here. I know that we're looking at a couple of places that the Ausable River Association has contemplated taking dams out that are in the way of free passage of the river right now, and hopefully we will have some proposals to share with others very shortly on that stuff. Questions so far?
Okay. Yes, John. Yeah. Given what we're seeing in the Pacific Northwest and from Colorado West going west with regards to heating up, I mean, again, is there added incentive to remove dams to allow for, cold water fish species to migrate much more freely? Is that basically even much more urgent now given the general warm up? So, I mean, is that adding additional pressure or incentive to remove dams?
I think it has to. We're also looking at places where there's a wilderness classification, and a dam, even though it's been there a long time, is a non-conforming structure that has not been removed yet by the state, but under either the state land master plan or other state statutes has been scheduled to go when it's convenient. Now, we didn't have a big argument over the removal of the dam at Marcy Dam, mainly because it got blown out by a storm, and the state during the recession didn't have the resources to rebuild it. So the argument was avoided in that case. But I think going forward, there will be people that want to defend the dam or some feature of the dam that will have to debate over some of these issues and talk about the benefits of ecological benefits, especially in light of climate change, that hadn't been considered in the past.
John, does the state have a uniform policy for management of dams on forest preserved lands?
I don't think so.
I don't think so either. But
I've never encountered it, and yeah. I've been working on licensing and relicensing issues for many years, so I haven't seen it, and it's one of the things that had been subject of a legal battle that we got involved in and then got out of again, but carried on without us, that established the state's responsibility for managing wilderness lakes as wilderness lakes, and that includes taking out non-conforming structures such as hydro dams that either prevent it from being classified as wilderness or prevent it from being managed as wilderness.
Right.
John, I think that Just Grant makes a really good point. And so I think that we should distinguish hydropower versus just existing dams too, right? Because not all of these are producing power.
That's true. Although most are, there are a few that were impoundments that were for other reasons that don't have electricity equipment hooked up to them right now. That is one other possibility that we may have to, well, that we're going to have to take a look at is that really appropriate in places where it's possible? Because with the state seeking more renewable energy, regardless of what the overall plan for energy consumption and conservation might be, there's a push to create more green electrons out there. We will get pressure to either establish electricity production at places that don't have it now, or to increase it with equipment replacement or some adjustment to the dam structure in places that do have it now. And there is a possibility that we will go from what is a relatively benign run-of-the-river facility to something that, with an impoundment someplace that we don't want to see, that will both affect inundating water, inundating land that is not covered in water right now, or changing the ecology of a river valley.
Yeah, and I think it's an important question to consider if we are looking to help this, like, if we want to focus the concentration of electricity production on fulfilling the needs of Adirondack communities, or do we want to continue to help support the overall state climate goals? And I realize that supporting the park lends itself to supporting the state, but.
Right. Well, and that's a good point. I mean, New York relies on the Adirondacks as a battery right now for electricity that it's not producing in other places. You know, I think Paul Schaefer's struggle in the 1970s to stop the Panther Mountain Dam that would have essentially put the Moose River Plains under 60 feet of water was the culmination of a lot of soul searching statewide about how large a price we wanted to pay for electricity. But it happened a long time ago now, and I think I'm concerned that we're going to have to refight that battle at some point. And that while I don't think we're going to see another major proposal for inundating a large landscape in the Adirondacks, we do need to know whether we support things like bringing Canadian hydro down from the projects up in northern Quebec that is being proposed for the line that would travel under Lake Champlain and come to New York City. And in that case, we're not being asked to host a dam, but we are being asked to host infrastructure. And whether that, and a new type of infrastructure that we haven't hosted before. So there are concerns over what the impacts might be and how we can mitigate those without necessarily stopping a project that would be beneficial to the state overall. And some of that, I think, has to be a cultural issue. Where the hydropower is coming from, whose communities are impacted by that, and whether they are getting a fair shake in this deal. And not just economically, but ecologically as well. I think, given the fact that it's an indigenous community that's being affected the most, they're likely to be led by people that are putting the environment first. But given the amount of money involved, that may not always be the case. So we'll have to be careful with who we're listening to in this as well. But you know, the billions that would be made by connecting to New York City, this hydro, will put a lot of people that may not have the park's best interest at heart into the conversation. So we'll have to be representing the Adirondack interest in all of those discussions as well. The vast, if you count the whole North Country as the electric battery for downstate and pull in the Robert Moses Power Project on the St. Lawrence River, that really makes the North Country a huge source of electricity. If you take away the Robert Moses Power Dam, the Adirondacks are a significant source of electricity for the state, but not the main source. And certainly, we have a ton of dams, but they are generally much smaller than the ones that are on the St. Lawrence. If you've not seen that project, I'd encourage you to go to Messina and see what it looks like to harness an entire river of that size. It is remarkable, a little sad at the same time, but you get a sense of scale from that, especially if you come home via St. Regis Falls and look at the much smaller one there on the way back. But just give you a sense of how our rivers have been impacted. The hundreds of dams that are out there, each of them doing a little bit of damage, has caused a cumulative impact on the park that we really don't want to see replicated. But again, we have a generational issue where nobody alive was around to see what the rivers looked like before the dams went in. So having the opportunity to revert even a couple of these to their original state, we need to take the time to document that and make sure that people know what that looks like and what a blessing that becomes for the river itself. That's about all I've got for today on this topic. Are there still, let me just check the chat to see if there are other questions. Okay. Has the FPAC, the Forest Preserve Advisory Committee meeting on the tree cutting case been held yet?
Yeah, it was last week. Let me forward you some notes from Kevin. He attended with Phil Gitlin.
Thank you. My suggestion is that with regard to the hydropower on the Forest Preserve issue, that's probably a good place to start. That we may have some institutional knowledge there, especially with Gibson's outfit having Paul Schaefer's historical perspective on that. But I haven't talked to Dave about the Black River project yet, but I am certain that we're going to do that. Now, back when the projects were being licensed in the 1990s and 2000s, a new group was formed called New York Rivers United that really took on the role of coordinating the comments to the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission and making sure that all the issues were brought forward and went to each of the hearings and that sort of thing. That group disbanded quite some time ago, and I don't see a new one emerging. So there may be it may be that we're going to have to play a larger role than we did in the past in making sure that these licenses get a good review and that we take advantage of the opportunities to improve them. And remember that hydro licenses for power dams last for between 30 and 50 years. So the decisions made now are going to affect our grandkids and how the river is run then. So we really want to do a thorough job and try and think forward in terms of, and climate has never been an issue in the licensing of any of these facilities so far. That's got to come into the equation somehow.
Hey, John, I know we're nearly at our time, but I just had another question.
Yeah.
So this is a federal arena, but how does can the state engage on this issue to make sure that it's, if they're looking at habitat connectivity, how can they support that? I know that through the FERC relicensing process, they pull in a lot of public engagement and do outreach to stakeholders. But I've not actually gone through that process yet. So
it's really been DEC helping out with the Bureau of Fisheries and Lands and Forests. So we'll need to connect with them and see if they. I assume they're aware, but you know what they're doing to try and prepare for this, and whether we can play a complementary role. And certainly as advocates that we can do some things to put pressure on the federal government to do a thorough job that they might not be able to do as state officials.
Thank you.
Folks, thank you very much for your time. Any other questions on this, please shoot me an email. I'll happily answer it. And have a good rest of your day.
Thanks, John. This was really great. Just another shameless plug for anyone who might want to do a future brown bag seminar. I think we have the next couple of months open, and that's the 4th Monday of the month. So please reach out to anyone on the conservation team if you're interested. And this was really interesting. I think we will have follow-up conversation in the near term about this particular topic. So thank you for the primer, John.
My pleasure. Thanks, everybody.